Then the Lindt Cafe Siege came. That knocked the wind out of me. Because I was in the city at that day as a detective sergeant.
Right, yep.
The job happened in my patch. It all went very pear-shaped very quickly. First thing I did when I was get to work was directed to take down 3 toe tags for the deceased, still in situ at the cafe. I got back to the office that night and I just felt sick, physically sick. I really couldn't drive past Martin Place for a long time. At the end of the day, you know, you don't think it's going to happen in your area, but it did.
Cheryl Grimmer.
A 3-year-old girl called Cheryl Grimmer. She was an English national. Came out here as part of the sponsorship for the £10 POM program. And they were living in a hostel not far from Ferry Meadow Beach. Mum was with the kids at the hostel. Took Cheryl to the beach this particular hot Monday. Mum instructs the kids, righto, go up to have a shower, and we're going to go home back to the hostel. And anyway, the 3 boys are up in the shower, and little Cheryl tags along with them. The mum says, I'll go and grab her. So the mum rushes up to the ladies' portion, and she's not there. Never seen again.
The I Catch Killers podcast was a fresh start for me, as I left policing behind and started a new life. Over the years, we've laughed together, cried, and shared some powerful moments. Welcome to I Catch Killers. Damian Loone, welcome back to I Catch Killers.
Thank you, Gary Jubelin.
Okay, well, if you missed part 1, we're talking about Damian's career in the New South Wales Police and a lot of things about being a detective, but we were concentrating on the Lynette Dawson case. That's the case where the lady disappeared 82?
Yep.
82. It's been made famous by the Teacher's Pet podcast, where a lot of people have heard about it, and her husband was Chris Dawson, who was eventually convicted of her murder. But what we talked about in part 1 was Damian's involvement in the investigation. You're working at DY Detectives and you got handed basically a piece of paper. And from that piece of paper, you built up a brief of evidence. And the brief of evidence got to the point where it went to the coroner. Coroner referred it to the DPP. DPP knocked it back and said there's insufficient evidence for a known person to be charged.
Yep.
You've then gathered more evidence. You've then taken it to another inquest, and a different coroner referred it back to the DPP. So that's the point that we're at. What year are we talking?
That was 2003, the second inquest.
Okay.
So that's where I get that we're not going to do anything about this matter.
Yep.
So it was then a matter of, okay, well, so it's insufficient evidence from the DPP. So what do I do here? Do I just can the brief now, think I'm never going to get over the line?
Yeah.
By this stage, it's about 21 years old, I suppose, we're going to. So, we're losing a lot of memories of witnesses. We're losing witnesses who are unfortunately not with us any longer.
Yep.
So I'm running out of time. In that year, just after the DPP made an announcement that they wouldn't proceed, I shot an Australian story on it, and that opened up a can of worms as well. So some witnesses came forward, and I was able to track them down and get some statements from them. And I'm not sure if all of them were used in the trial, but I know that one particular lady who's now unfortunately passed away had some very interesting things to say. But
just on that, holding that point there, because I've been involved in investigations that Australian Story have done stories on, and there's been progress made on the investigations. On these difficult cases, these ones, and if you listen to part 1, you're basically banging your head up against a brick wall trying to get progress on the investigation. A media profile helps a great deal. Helps a great deal to not only bring witnesses forward, but also gives the whole investigation some momentum.
And it does, and because it's not, I never wanted Lynn Dawson's story to be forgotten.
Yeah. And
that's what I was worried about, because it'd been so long since we actually did the reinvestigation on it back from 1998. And I'm still continuing at this stage at 2003, 2004, that I didn't want Lynn Dawson just to become a memory. I wanted her story to be told and what really happened to her. And I had a fairly good idea what had happened to her, but I had to convince the prosecutors to prosecute.
Yeah.
And they weren't either not listening to me or weren't reading the brief properly. So it was a matter of keep going. And it was for 2 children who grew up believing that the mother had just run away, which wasn't the case. Her sister, her father passed away, Lynn's father passed away, and mother passed away, both not knowing what happened to their daughter. So now I'm down to a sister and a brother that were still alive. Plus, as I said earlier on, it doesn't affect one person, it affects multiple people. So now I've got the relatives involved.
Yep.
The uncles, the aunties, the kids, the nieces and nephews, etc. The friends of Lynette Dawson, friends from the family, friends from work, colleagues that she loved and loved Lynn. So they're the ones I concentrated on. So I didn't want it to become just a memory. So it was, and I'm not going to go up here. I know I've been told, look, mate, you're not a policeman. I'm not a policeman for a postcode. Just because it didn't happen in my area or your area doesn't mean I can't still keep doing it.
It makes you feel like you're not looking at it with the proper perspective when you have all these people chipping away at you. So you've got to be fairly stoic to stand up to that.
And look, I was accused straight away, I think, in one of the legal arguments of being just having, blinkers on and just believing that Chris Dawson had done this. But I was left with no other alternative.
Yeah.
There weren't any other alternatives. So I just continued, and momentum. Through one of the media releases, I had an artist come to me. She said, "Look, I was commissioned to sketch the two girls from a photograph and present it to Lynn after Christmas, shortly before she disappeared." And she did that, and she went to made some contact with the Dawson household, and was told that she wasn't there anymore, and they don't want the sketchings.
Okay, so a little piece of evidence like that, it's quite interesting.
I went to this artist's studio, and she had them.
Yeah.
She never got rid of them.
Okay, well, it's starting to put a little piece together.
Presented me with this beautiful photograph of these two little kiddies that were Lynn's two daughters.
Okay.
Unreal. Just I couldn't believe it was out there,
So little things like that. Yeah. So did you feel like you were making progress? Did you feel that because the second time the matter's been referred to the DPP, what was their response to that?
Oh, yet again, insufficient evidence.
Okay, so
one-liner.
So you're left with an investigation that you've had, 2 inquests, you've had 2 reviews by the DPP, both telling you that there's insufficient evidence, and they're the state prosecuting body. You can, of course, commence proceedings outside of that, but you'd be probably foolish to do.
Oh, and I couldn't, and I wouldn't do that, because I know that why would I take... And I think you and I are both on the same page. Taking someone's liberty away from them is probably the most serious. It's the serious thing you can do to a person, and I didn't want to do that because I knew that it wouldn't proceed. So why would I do that?
Okay. Yeah. So what the options were that you just had to continue on and hopefully get that piece of evidence.
And that's right. And the brief stalled at times. So things were happening in my private life and I couldn't continue. I was busy with other particular jobs, and then when I'd get something more information, I'd work on it. We might release some information, some methodology we might have had employed. There might have been some telephone intercepts, etc., and some ideas, thinking outside the square. I think at one stage the family were gained quite a lot of comfort of a clairvoyant coming in. Yeah. Now, I'm not paying for it. Yeah. Cops aren't paying for it. Can I be present whilst this clairvoyant's in a room? And you've got to think outside the square sometimes. I didn't. Obviously, I'm not going to rely on what's being said, but I've never seen a clairvoyant in my life. I don't know what they do. So I was interested to see what happened, and it was remarkable. This woman sat down and sort of fondled some of Lynn's jewellery, and she was like talking to another as if Lynn was in the room. And I think one of the conversations were that Lynn's here. She just says, "Damian, keep going," and I'm thinking, wow, are you Captain Ratch or me? But,
look, take whatever you can.
But the family got comfort out of it.
Look, I've had...
If it worked, it worked,
I've had clairvoyants try to help out families. I've had families come to me and all that. I sit here with a smile on my face because, they've never actually solved the case. But you've got it's the wishes of the family.
Well, I go under the Victims' Rights Charter in the police force, care and compassion, and support. So if they wanted to do this, and they invited me there as a guest in a family home, and I said, do you mind if I film it?
Yep.
So I've got the video unit down there to do it. Yep. I said, it's not hard. We're going to set up a tripod and just whack on play, and that's it, And we did that, but I found that the family got a lot of comfort out of it.
Yeah, okay.
And so if I'm ticking all the boxes with victim care, I think I'm on the right track.
Okay. And it's not going to be used as evidence. But
no, of course not. It was never going to be used.
Family get comfort. Well, I understand. I understand that. Yep. Okay, so where are we progressing then? So this is going over the years. So
Over the years now, yep.
Fast forward it
So
to...
in 2009, I think I
Yep.
told you we had that DNA examination. So
Yep.
this is in 2009. So I take that garment over to the States. It takes about 9 months for it to be examined. Comes back and there's basically no DNA. But if I hadn't have done it, I would have been asked why I hadn't done it. So
Yep.
I did it.
Yeah.
Come back again in 2011, I think at the Sesquicentenary, I think it was. I think at the 150th anniversary.
That was the 212.
212.
I think. Yeah.
I had a meeting shortly after seeing you.
Yep.
I walked away thinking, you haven't read the brief, You haven't. I've just spent 45 minutes talking to you, but you haven't read the brief.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know why. Why aren't you going to... It's all there. You've got 2 coroners who have supported me. The statements are all here. Lynn wasn't a person that would have walked away from the children. She may have walked away from the husband, but she certainly would not have walked away from the kids, and particularly her association and the closeness with her mother and the other siblings. So what aren't you seeing here, in the big picture?
Yeah.
And anyway, again, only to be told, well, we can't tell you the reasons why, but keep going. And that's what they said. I've got this.
Yeah. Oh,
but
well,
you keep going.
Yeah.
That's the old, favourite, go away line. You keep going with this.
Can't tell you why, because we haven't really got a reason why.
Yeah, well, I can't tell you why, because it was confidential, the reasons as to why, because it was done in-house and they couldn't let me know. So, but as I said, well, you sort of like, how do I tell this back to the family? Then the Lindt Cafe Siege came.
Yeah.
That knocked the wind out of me.
Okay, you in your role as the a police negotiator?
No, I had been on call. I think I was on call the following week.
Yeah.
Because I was in the city at that day as a detective sergeant.
Ah, right. Yep.
The job happened in my patch.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So I rock up thinking, okay, it's an armed robbery. We've got a hostage situation.
Yeah.
But it all went very pear-shaped very quickly,
Yeah.
and it obviously came out of my jurisdiction. Counter-terrorism took the job on, and no longer was Damian Loone going to be in charge of this at the Sydney City Police.
Yeah.
It's our baby now. Happy days, because it was a very, very intense day, and lots of things were happening, and I think, as you can imagine, what was going on at that time. It was
I ended up
chaos.
doing the crime scene,
Yeah,
so it was chaos.
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
And having been a police negotiator since 2001, even though I wasn't the negotiator on the day, I knew everyone involved.
Yeah.
I helped set up the negotiator cell up at the Leagues Club there, because I knew the management there, and and things weren't working so well there, I believe. But and the guys that were in the truck on Elizabeth Street trying to talk to this clown inside the Lindt Cafe, he just wasn't speaking to them. So it's very, very difficult. It's a hard line to negotiate. Yeah. And anyway, as we know, things went pear-shaped early hours the next morning, and that sort of, I felt really sad.
Yeah. I haven't seen a crime scene that there was so, because I went in straight after the shootings happened, and it affected a lot of people. I think it was just such a visual thing too.
And I remember I'd been there all day, a long day. And I lived on the south coast, and I had to come back to work that afternoon. And the first thing I did when I was get to work was directed to take down 3 toe tags for the deceased, still in situ at the cafe.
Yeah.
And I got back to the office that night, and I just felt sick, physically sick. Here we are. I'm knowing how the negotiators would have felt. Yeah. I'm knowing how the families may have felt about the deceased.
Yeah, tactical police too.
The tactical coppers that went in there and risked their lives and everything else. And I suppose there were good and bad decisions made on the day, and I think it came out in the coroner's inquest. But at the end of the day, you don't think it's going to happen in your area, but it did.
Yeah. And it was extreme. And you saw the outpouring of grief from the city, all the flowers around the crime scene. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I know. It was unbelievable.
Yeah. Okay, so we're looking around that time.
So it took the wind out of me. I had some time off, and in that time, I had a phone call from Dan Poole from Unsolved Homicide.
Yep.
He was a senior constable at the time, and I met up with him. And surprisingly, I'd gone to the Unsolved Homicide on 3 occasions for them to assist.
Yep.
And I got knocked back.
Surprise.
And I said, look, I will even drive from my home to the office every day if you give me a couple of blokes to exclusively look at this and work on it. Oh, no, mate, you're doing just as good a job that we can do. You keep it. So I'll get the fault flick pass here with the old football, I think, And even though I'd offered, and then suddenly out of the blue, I get a phone call, mate, we want to take this on. Well, what's happened here? What's happened? I don't know. And that's when it was taken over. And then I had really no involvement. I had some statements to do, I think.
I would, and I know the workings of homicide and at that senior level. I would dare say started to get a profile. It was a story that wasn't going to go away. People started to look at it and, we better have a look at it, even though you'd tried on 3 occasions beforehand and were...
And look, I had no idea years later that this would be turned into a thing called a podcast. And the media, I was at the trial when the verdict was announced. I've never seen a media scrum like it.
The interest in it, we had Hedley Thomas here on the podcast, and the amount of listens to the podcast is just incredible, in the millions and millions. It's
I had coffee with Hedley last week, and he's a remarkable man and a very good journalist. And I've said this from day one. If we think now that investigative journalism doesn't have a place in society for investigations, well, we're wrong.
Yeah.
Let's go with the times now. This is 2024, not 2004.
Yeah.
And let's move on, because I do believe there are some very, very talented, dedicated and hard-working dogged journos out there who can do a good job.
In this very room, having Hedley sitting where you're sitting, I think I gave him credit for the fact
I'm looking at one right now.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
The focus that Hedley, through the podcast and the interest in it, that plays a part. Now, people in the powers that be, whoever those powers might be, say, no, we're not influenced by media or public interest. I say bullshit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolute bullshit.
Yeah. If no one was making a scream about it, if you just accepted every decision and said, oh, well, there's nothing more I can do, and went to the family and said, I've been told that I'm not to work on it anymore because I've moved locations. If you did that and didn't push, it wouldn't have got to where it did. If Hedley didn't pick it up and keep the interest in it and get the public looking at it, how has this injustice occurred? How have we let this happen? It wouldn't be solved.
No. And I firmly believe that with the Teacher's Pet podcast, it pushed the scales of justice to run it at a trial. And look, so be it. If it was an acquittal or not guilty or a guilty verdict, at least we've heard the evidence.
Yeah.
And one thing I would have liked to have and highlighted, at least the domestic violence in a family home, because it was rated as a domestic violence homicide.
Yeah.
So that would have been out there. If I was going to win anything there, it would have been that. But it would have also exonerated Lynn. She just didn't run away from home.
Yeah.
How
did you feel when and it was 2022?
It's 22, yep.
How did you feel when...
30th of August, I think it was. Well, that was a wild. We came down. The wife and I drove down from the North Coast.
Yep.
She came down to support me.
Yeah.
And I had another good mate of mine, Dave Lillyman, who's now at Counter-Terrorism. He was a fine investigator and assisted me with Lynette Dawson at times when I needed some assistance. And Dave sat next to me and my wife, and we went through the roller coaster of the verdict through Justice Ian Harrison.
Yeah.
5 hours. It was, thinking all the good things are being said, then all the bad things were being said. So, Dave's looking at me, he's putting his thumbs down, and he suddenly put his thumb up. But I think the telling part was not long into the verdict that Justice Harrison found that Lynette Dawson didn't leave her home at Bayview voluntarily on Friday, the 8th of January 1982.
Yeah.
And to me, that was a relief.
That's significant in a
so
circumstantial
where are
brief.
we going?
Yeah.
Where are we going with this? So, and then there was some evidence that he said it had been said in the trial, at words said by Chris Dawson, that he didn't rely upon. Some injuries that were noticed on Lynn's throat or knees, whatever, weren't relied upon. So I'm thinking, okay, well, but this was a very smart verdict.
Yeah.
I thought it was a very, very smart verdict. But without all of that anyway, and take all that aside, and this is what Harrison said, it was a circumstantial brief of evidence. Now, without a body, with no murder weapon, or how she was murdered, or where she's disposed of, take all that aside, I still find you guilty of Lynn's homicide, and she didn't leave that home voluntarily on Friday, the 8th of January 82.
Well, it's I think people are interested in it because of the nature of the crime. It was such a brutal crime and just a selfish crime. The whole thing about it, but also the fact that justice has been done so much later. I was so happy that result came through, because I think it shows that things can be done when you don't just accept every knockback. You push a little bit further. So yeah, I'm sitting here now saying to you, well done. Like, well done, because I know how these things can just be lost in the system. And did you get to celebrate?
I'll just add that after Dawson was charged, I got called down to Sydney to speak to Craig Everson, the Crown Prosecutor.
Yeah, I know Craig.
And a really nice, and this is probably the nicest thing that's ever been said to me in the cops. And I've never met Craig Everson before. Yeah. I wouldn't know if I fell over him. I do now. I walked into his office and he stood up and shook my hand and said, "You're vindicated." So, and he said, "I wasn't here in the DPP in the days that you were pushing." Yeah. He said, he apologised. I said, "Well, don't apologise." He said, "But you're vindicated, mate." Yeah. So after the trial, we're outside in the Supreme Court of the Square there. I've never seen a media frenzy like it. There were choppers everywhere. There were cameramen everywhere. There were, you name it, live TV crosses here, left and right and centre. I think I walked out of court within about the 10 minutes of being upstairs in the court 13A and downstairs to the forecourt. I'd had 93 missed phone calls and 106 messages because I had my phone on silent. Wow. And it was it a time of celebration? I don't think it was.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
We're not in there punching the fist in the air and going, we got up. It's like winning your football team and getting up in the grand final.
There's still a sadness.
It was a sad day because, and I said this to Simon Boda from The Current Affair the following night. Yeah. I get what the family are going through, the Dawson family, Chris Dawson's family. I get that. I understand the pain, the sorrow, because they're believing the other side of the story. And I'm absolutely aware of that, and I do not at all think anything bad about it at all. For Lynn's family, it was a relief that this had been going on for so long, and mind you, the parents and a brother had died, not knowing what happened to Lynn. Yeah. Aunties and uncles had passed away. It was now that the truth had come out, that what I always believed in the first place and what they believed in as well was truth. So it wasn't a hands in the air, punch in the air sort of verdict. It was a big sigh of relief, and the last breath came out of you, and then suddenly you were calm. And we all walked away. We went back down to our hotel back in Sydney, in the city, and we had some drinks, but it was nothing like a football team celebrating a grand final.
I think you described that very well, because that is it's sort of a mixed feeling. There's sadness, there's relief.
It is sad. Yeah. And thinking after all those bloody years I put into, I think it's nearly 20, I was 18 or nearly 20 odd years of work, you think, well, wow, that's half my career.
The Teacher's Pet, and I know there's a lot of the Teacher's Pet podcast, all the versions that have been out. There's a lot of, how do I say it? Some people say it hinders an investigation. Some people say it helps an investigation. Do you think anything that was done on Teacher's Pet, the podcast, had any negative impact on the investigation or the court matter?
Well, look, I know Headley was cross-examined by this in the stay application and heavily criticised in relation to it, which was unfair, I thought. He never knew that this matter would ever be proceeded with by a criminal trial. Like me, I never, at stage, never believed it'd ever go any further. And shortly thereafter, it did. So the timing's probably not right. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I think, and from my own perspective, that the pressure it must have placed upon those who make the decisions would have been immense.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll take it even further. I'd go as far as to say that, without it, there's a good chance it mightn't have got to trial.
And I say that now myself as well, knowing what was done and the professionalism of that podcast. Yeah. And the clear, concise, dulcet tones of Headley that everyone fell in love with. And as I said earlier on, if you don't think that investigative journalism has a place in society now, well, you're wrong.
Yeah, I think we've got to accept the landscape's change, and just the podcast landscape. It opens so many more things that, we've just got to change with the times, roll with the times.
Yeah, stop being so stoic and so, as I said, this is 2024.
Do you look back on like an investigation like that? Not every detective has investigations like that impact on you. I've had a lot of good detectives sit here. I've had ones that have picked the ball up and just run, and they look back and they think, what sacrifices have I done for this? I look at some of the investigations I've done and I think, yeah, I'd probably do the same thing, but sometimes I reflect and think, at what price have I given to that investigation? Did you think that about that investigation at any time?
I did, and I think I was asked this a number of times in the trial, but sometimes you forget, and it comes to you later on afterwards, but I always felt every time I got that letter from the DPP to say they weren't going to run the trial, or weren't going to charge, I let the family down. So I took it personally.
Yeah.
What am I doing? Where have I gone wrong? And I started to question myself. And that's a self-guilt.
Yeah.
And I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me, and I never wanted anyone to feel sorry for me, but I'm thinking, am I doing a good enough job? Or should I go out there and ask for more help? You know?
Yeah.
But who's going to give it to me? I've gone to the people that should be helping me, and they said, no, mate, you're doing as much as we could do that you're doing, so you keep it. So I know, and then I try and get someone else involved in it. Look, this matter may not go anywhere. Will you help me? What do you mean, mate? I don't want to work on a job that's going to go nowhere. You know, that's the sort of attitude you get. But I did find solace in Dave Lilliman and Sarah Thompson. I used to work with her down at the Rocks before we merged as to one big command.
Yeah.
And they were great. But then I only had to go back to the family and make one phone call, and boom, straight away I'm back up there again, and I've shred that old sorry me cloak. And I've got the Superman cloak on now, and I'm going, because that's what really got me going. It was the family's belief in me that we would do something. And I said, I can't promise you anything, but I will promise you I'll give you my best shot.
Yeah, it's funny the impact the families have. And I've got victims' families that are now like my family, in that you become so close over the years working. And some people often say, well, how do you get the strength to just keep going and going on an investigation? And I always attribute it to the families. You go there, I could be at my lowest point, and the whole range of families, I go see them and all right, I'll pick the fight. Let's do it again.
Yeah. And, you've just described exactly what I went through, when you're feeling that self-pity and you're doubtful and is it ever going to go anywhere? And then you think, hang on, I'm not the one that's lost someone here.
Yeah.
And I would contact them and say, hey, and boom.
So however sad and sorry you're feeling for yourself, you look at what they're going through, and that puts it in perspective, and you go.
And I think that's the uniqueness of detectives, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And not all police, but I think detectives, because they're so involved in so many cases like this, and it have so much contact for a long period of time. Yeah. Not like a uniform copper who go, and I've got nothing against uniform coppers. No. I love them.
Yeah.
But their job is to go boom, 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 and we just hit one job.
It's a different role,
and we're there for a long time. And as in some of your matters, if it's been for years, and like mine, and you're in constant contact.
Yeah. Sometimes people, I know they've used it against me, like as in a criticism, it's sort of backhanded compliment. Oh yeah, he's very passionate, and that it pisses me off when I hear that, because I think lazy people say that. They hide behind, oh no, he cares too much, it's too passionate. Like, if you're going to, and I keep bringing it back, investigating a homicide is a very, very serious role. Someone's lost their life. If you haven't got the drive to do that, do something else. You're not a conscript there. And I just think it's so important. But I love the story. I love the story of what you did. And to me, it typifies what goes on behind the scenes, what we don't always see with investigations. And you think, okay, but sometimes it just takes the grit of one person just going. And I know you'll pay tribute to other people that have carried the ball up with you. But, sometimes you just got to hang in there and you get a result. And, if you look back at your career and that's the one thing you got, you think, that was worthwhile.
And I think my last, I think I sent out an email just before I retired at midday, or before we had a few drinks. I sent out to the whole command and I said, believe in yourself, but also have empathy for others, and always remember, there was a little catchphrase I have, and that's what used to get me going through, and I'll say it, when you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
Okay.
Boom.
Okay.
And that sort of made my job a lot easier. I've eliminated everything that's impossible.
Yep.
Okay, there's some remnants floating around,
Yeah.
but it's got to be the truth.
Okay.
And that's
Not a bad way of looking at it.
ABC of, 101 investigations.
Very good. Any budding detectives out there, take note. I want to talk about another case, and it's another case that you've picked up, and the classic thing, and I think there is a type that, why do these cases find you? But Cheryl Grimmer, do you want to tell?
Sad.
Very, very sad, and somewhat confusing how it's gone the way it's gone. Do you want to just talk us through that case, how you became involved in it, and what the background to it was?
Well, I was on a sort of like a return to work program from the Lindt Cafe, and I lived close to Wollongong at that time. And I was travelling to Sydney every day, and I was doing my head in. I really couldn't drive past Martin Place for a long time.
Yeah.
It was just, and prior to that, I'd done a heap of suicides. And I'd drive past a building, and they jumped out of that building. It wasn't a place you couldn't drive around without finding someone that's jumped out of a building somewhere. So I said, look, and I said, I want to come back to work, because I got offered to go out on a pension, HOD pension, Heard on Duty pension. I said, no, well, has anyone asked me?
I don't want to.
And they went, that's we've never had this. You're a pre-88er, mate. You're like an old cop on a good pension scheme. We've never had this before. We'll get back to you. So a month later, I get a phone call. Wollongong said, we'll have him with open arms. So I'll go up and work at Wollongong. It's great. It's a great command, good people, 20 minutes from home, happy days. So another detective up there, Frank Sandovalli, has just started a reinvestigation of a homicide or abduction from Ferrymeadow Beach on the 12th of January 1970 of a 3-year-old girl called Cheryl Grimmer. She was an English national. Yep. Came out here as part of the sponsorship for the £10 POM program. And they were living in a hostel not far from Ferrymeadow Beach. Cheryl was 3. There was 3 other brothers and a mum and dad. The father, Vince, was a sapper up at Penrith. He joined the army. He was up at Penrith in his barracks up there. Mum was with the kids at the hostel. Took Cheryl to the beach this particular hot Monday, and as what happens on the south coast, the southerly always comes up about lunchtime. Yep. So it was stinging their legs. So Mum instructs the kids, righto, go up to have a shower, and we're going to go home back to the hostel. And anyway, the 3 boys are up in the shower, and little Cheryl tags along with them. She's playing up. She's a stubborn little 3-year-old, as you can imagine. And so the other 2 boys go back down to where the mum is, and the eldest brother, Ricky, goes back to say to his mother, Carol, look, Cheryl's being a shit. She won't come. So the mum says, I'll go and grab her. So the mum rushes up to the toilet block, to the ladies' portion, and she's not there. Yeah. Never seen again. Big investigation. The CIB from Sydney come down and take over the job. Despite searches everywhere, Cheryl's never, ever been located. And that's where it remained until about 16 months later, where a 16-year-old boy or a 17-year-old boy came forward. Yep. And he said that he was responsible for taking her from the beach that particular day.
To who did he say that to?
He said it to, he was in custody at the time at the Albion Street Juvenile Shelter. He had been charged with a charge of stealing. He was a runaway from Victoria from a juvenile detention centre. Yep. So he was in this custody in Albion Street. And Joe Parrington, the ex-former detective superintendent, received a phone call at CIB headquarters. That's the old Criminal Investigation Bureau, for those who don't know the CIB. These guys wore 3-piece suits and a hat, so that's the era we're talking about. And they go down and interview him. And they get a signed confession, duration of 8 or 9 pages from him. And he clearly states that he took Cheryl away. He saw her, saw what she was wearing, saw her walk up to the beach, saw her get picked up and get a drink from the water bubbler, which becomes very important. And then he says he sees a man on a brick wall near the shower block, between the 2 shower blocks. He says he rushes around. He says he has to put his hand over her mouth because if she'd screamed, that man would have seen it or heard it.
Right.
And he runs away. And he runs up the road and into some bushland they call Pucky's Estate. And he hides there for some considerable time. And then through that access he goes, he says he takes the girl up to a certain part of the lookout at Broker's Nose in the Illawarra. And it's farmland. He takes away there for the purpose of having sexual intercourse. He gets there, the child's not breathing. He then covers her with branches and leaves and runs from the area, disposes of the towel that she had and her bathing costume.
That's a fairly detailed description of the crime.
And this is recorded in a record of interview.
Okay.
And that record of interview was basically dispensed with as being someone who's just made up a story.
The amount of detail there, and you've got to be wary of that can happen. But there's a lot that could be explored and checked, and it seemed fairly detailed.
Well, we went back to Ferry Meadow, and we did...
So at the time,
yeah.
when the police have taken that, so there's 16 months after her disappearance, it was the perception or their belief was he's just making this up. Is that what you think happened?
They took him for a walkthrough, and a walkthrough is, for those listening, it's a reenactment of what you've done on the day. And in those days, they didn't video it like we do now. It was just a walkthrough. And he did some certain things which were unusual, and it didn't sort of fit in with what really happened. So I think that the investigators thought, well, this bloke's bunging it on. He's not telling us the truth. I think that he realised he was in so much trouble that he had to bung it on, so they wouldn't believe it. And they wrote him as they left him as a person of interest, but discontinued the investigation into him.
Right.
And this is someone who said 16 months after, when there'd been no press about it, and who had allegedly absconded to Western Australia days after. And we made checks that there wasn't any media about what was happening in the east over in the west. And his story that he gave, Frank and I got this record of interview. So it was putting it all together, and boom, I find this record of interview. And I said to Frank, mate, we're going to... And we had dozens and dozens of telephone book, old running pad entries, etc. There was never put on Eagle Eye. So first thing we have to do, Eagle Eye is a police reference for our criminal investigation system, that we load everything onto a system. It's a computer system, and it helps us search for words, patterns, etc., clothing, or whatever. So we put everything in manually, and then we started going through everything. And remarkably, when I came across the record of interview, the detail in this record of interview was disturbing.
Yeah.
And it was just something that someone could not simply make up.
Yeah.
I think you've seen or heard stuff like that.
Yeah. I have. I've seen stuff like that where you're looking for. People do confess to crimes that they haven't committed.
Yep.
But when they give you that type of detail, you're thinking, oh, hold it, only the offender could know that. They're the pieces of information you're looking for, the type of detail when you're getting a confession.
Well, we do sometimes what we call holdback information, so only we know what's really happened. So if someone's going to tell us what really happened, they'd have to know what we know, you know what I mean? And the particular aspect of this was that he saw Cheryl being picked up and gave that description of how she was picked up and what happened to her when she was picked up. And she was picked up by the hips because she was too small to reach the bubbler, and the brother...
See, I see why you're focusing in on that.
Yeah.
That's something that you can't make up.
And he says then he sees a man sitting on a fence on a brick portion outside between the two toilet blocks.
Yeah.
Now he's waiting there for his wife, who's inside having a shower with her two kids, unbeknownst to the offender. That's the reason why he's there. So we track him down, and unfortunately, the witness that was sitting on the outside on the brick wall was deceased. But we go over to England to interview the wife. She recalls it that day specifically. And just prior to going over to England, I was privy to interview techniques with an expert in interviewing people from sort of like past memory. We wouldn't believe it happened a couple of days from going overseas.
Perfect. go. They're
And
all informed.
I was in a police station at Nottingham in the United Kingdom, and it was a very subtle room. It just had a couple of couches. You wouldn't know it was an interview room because right up in the corner was like a little camera. A couple of hidden microphones in the desk. So it's a very subtle, user-friendly sort of room. And I got her to sit back in the couch and say, "Well, just tell me. Let's go back to that day if we can." And she sort of didn't go into a trance or anything. It was just she was just relaxed. It was like a cognitive interview, and she closed her eyes. I said, "We've got all the time in the world here." I said, "What do you recall being in the shower portion that day at the showers and your husband Peter was sitting outside waiting for you?" And she brought up something which is a sensory, and it was just the smell. I could smell his Camel cigarettes wafting through the Besser-Brock bricks of the surf club.
Yeah.
And we know what surf clubs are made out in the 70s, all Besser-Brock bricks, weren't they? Besser-Block bricks. And she said, it's coming to me now. I knew he was there because I could smell his, and Peter smoked like a chimney, and it wafted in. And she said, "I'm actually smelling it right now."
Wow.
And I'm going, it's like Whoopi Goldberg on Ghost, moment sort of thing. And she says, "I went outside, and there he was."
Yeah.
So not only do we have a sensory of a smell, but she also has sight. I smell him being outside because his particular cigarette he smoked, but he's also there because I saw him with my own eyes. And this is what the accused said to police at the time of his interview. There was a man sitting outside that brick wall.
Yeah.
Now, you can't make that shit up.
Fits nicely.
Yeah.
So you've got that. You've been over to England.
Yep.
You can't come back. You've got that. Where did you go from there?
He was charged. We went down.
What was the process to get him charged?
All right.
You
So
put a brief together.
What we did was we put a brief together, and I sent it up. And this is we're not doing it by ourselves, by the way. I sent it up to legal services for a review and a comment in relation to charges of abduction and homicide. And because the coroner had found that she had been abducted and murdered, so we hope we've got the proof of death, etc. So we do that. It goes up to Parramatta, to our legal headquarters, and comes back a number of weeks later saying, charge him with this, and at this stage, charge him with homicide, and we can lay the additional charges down the track.
Okay.
Court. Prior to that, we set up a sting down in Victoria with him, meeting up with a witness to get things recorded. I had some great assistance down there from detectives down there in Victoria. And then we go down and we arrest him.
Yep.
And we bring him back. And we bring him back to Frankston Police Station and offer him and we've offered this fella legal assistance. You need to get some legal assistance. He was happy to be interviewed.
Right. Unusual, but...
And we stressed upon him the importance of receiving legal information and advice. And he said, "No, I'm happy to be interviewed." So, and this is after I've told him already.
You've arrested him and told him what the allegation is.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I said, in 1971, you made a statement to police, a confession to police. Yes. Is that your signature on each page of this document? Yes, it is. And we started to go through each of the questions, and it comes to Fairy Meadow. He says, "I've never been there in my life."
Right.
But yet living 600 metres away from it, because he was a former resident of the hostel.
Okay.
So we put all that together, we adopt the interview, and vehemently denies killing Cheryl, denies ever being going to Fairy Meadow Beach in his life. And yet we've got this unbelievable scenario.
Yeah.
He was showing us where he was seated, etc. And we even went to the extent when we went through the record of interview where he said he was watching from a position between the grass and the sand. And he said in the record of interview, I could see where I was seated. I couldn't see the door of entrance to the men's portion of the changing room, but I knew they were going there from where I was seated because there was a brick wall in the way. So we went down there with the rescue squad and we uncovered the old foundations of the brick wall.
Right.
And we did ISRAPs.
Yeah,
and
visual
3D animation as to what the old building looked like, and it pinpointed to where absolutely true.
It sounds like it's starting to get pretty strong.
Yeah.
Case here.
So I get the go-ahead to charge me. We go down to Victoria. We arrest him. He doesn't say boo once he's been bail refused.
Right.
I come back after lunch to take him to court, and the custody staff said to me, I've never seen someone so calm. If he hasn't done it, you think this bloke would be crawling up at the walls, but that didn't happen. He had legal assistance at court and he didn't object to the extradition to Sydney, and he was then extradited the following day back to Sydney, where he faced Wollongong local court and was formally refused bail.
Okay. After he was charged, the man pleaded not guilty to murdering Cheryl Grimmer. And then there was a twist in the case, but...
There was. We went for a number of brief preparations, requisitions from the DPP. We got all those done, put them before, and then there was a voir dire hearing in the Supreme Court back in 2019. And for those who don't understand, a voir dire basically is a legal argument in a trial. And if it's a jury trial, the jury don't hear the legal argument. So it's a trial within a trial, basically. Yeah. So just nutting out some legal arguments. And the record of interview was objected to. In the current climate, if a juvenile is interviewed, then they must have a support person present.
Yeah.
So Justice Hume at the Supreme Court made his verdict was that he'll apply retrospective legislation back to the day, even though back in 1970 it wasn't required.
You weren't required to have
until
an independent person. This is someone at the age of 16.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there was no need for an independent person prior to that day to be present. So if a juvenile made an admission, it could be used as evidence.
Yeah.
That law is retrospectively applied back to that date. And in the Crown we agreed that we couldn't proceed because all our investigations related to the record of interview.
So the voir dire, the record of interview, was thrown out, just so I'm clear on this. Thrown out because Justice Hume had decided that even though the legislation wasn't in place at the time of the confessional, the statement was taken, or the record of interview was taken, some 6 years later, that legislation came in that you should have an adult present if you're 16 years or under, if you're being interviewed by police, and made it retrospective back the 6 years to the... It's a hard pill to swallow.
How do you tell a family that?
How did you tell the family that?
Well, it got so serious that the elder brother was in court on that day that decision was made, and needless to say, I was worried about the welfare of the accused.
Yeah.
And I don't think I won't go any further than that. But I'll just say that steps were taken. Because, unfortunately, as you know, mate, as cops, we have to protect not only the good and the bad, but the ugly and everybody.
Sometimes you got to protect everyone. Yeah.
And sometimes you don't, but you have to.
Look, I have seen that case. I think I've spoken to Frank about the case.
Yes. He's passionate. Look, I'm not using that word passionate as the throwaway, but he's taken it quite hard. Yeah,
I know. It impacted on Frank. Since I've left the cops, I think I've spoken to him about the case and how it impacted. But, law's a funny thing, isn't it? Like we've got to respect it. We're the cops. Yeah, that's our job. They're the parameters we work in. But you see something like that, and Justice Hume, the work he's done, I've seen him make good decisions. He's a smart man.
Look, there's no suggestion of any anything adverse with Justice Hume. He works within the parameters of the legislation and the law, and I respect that. Yeah. And I've got nothing but respect for the courts, and I have to accept the umpire's decision. Like it or not, you have to, and I have.
Yeah, what a tragic tale, 3-year-old child, and I see the impact that William Tyrrell's disappearance is having, a 3-year-old child that's now 10 years down the track, and seeing the foster parents just last week when they were at court and the impact that it's had on them. And you made a good point. I think it might have even been in part one that when there's a homicide, it affects not just one person, not just the person closest to them, but a whole range of people.
It affects hundreds of people.
Yeah. And you've worked on ones that are long enough to see it, because I've seen it because I've worked on the long ones, where it becomes intergenerational too. Yep. It passes from the parent to the kids, and then the kids are carrying that burden. Yeah.
I was lucky enough last year to go to Lynn's uncle's 100th birthday.
Wow. Okay.
He was in a nursing home at Ballina,
Yeah.
and I was invited on that particular day. And we had all of Lynn's family were there, and it was a wonderful day to see this gentleman. And the first time I met him prior to that, but when he knew I was coming up to meet him, and this is the respect I have for this family, he wore a suit. He's 99, by the way. I wore a suit with all his war medals on because he respected me.
What a legend.
And I thought that was a wonderful thing. And that sort of, like, these are the subtle things that no one knows about.
Yeah.
With your compassion for victims and victim care, etc. That this person, 99 years of age, wow, he does that for me. Yeah. I felt so humbled by it.
It is humbling, and I've had gestures like that. I don't want to talk about them; they're private. But sometimes I'm just humbled. Sometimes I'm almost brought to tears by just simple gestures from people that you've crossed paths with in life, and they remember what was done. So, I'm interested in negotiating times.
Yeah.
We talk detectives. How did you find that? That's a pressure situation. I've seen it from the tactical point of view. I've been sitting there with the guns while the negotiators talking and different things. How did you find that in your career?
Oh, look, negotiators is a part-time job. Well, now, up until when I was doing it, I think now they've got a couple of full-time people there. But that was one of the most great experiences I ever had in the police. And mainly because of a wonderful person, Graham Abel, that you'd know.
Yeah, I
quite
know
well.
Graham. I've got a lot of time.
Graham was the commander of the negotiation unit at the counter-terrorism command there at Surrey Hills, and it was basically an interview, and you had to put an expression of interest, go for an interview, and if you got through that interview, then you were selected to go into a training course. Yeah. And I did a training course with about probably 15 or 20 others, and that was wonderful. We're all still family now, and I remember going out of my first job and I was a trainee basically. I hadn't done all there was 3 phases to negotiators course over a number of years. But I would go along as just watch and listen and look, I wouldn't say anything. Yeah. Here you are, you're up front in a bloody armoured vehicle.
Yeah, it's always exciting.
And there could be shots being fired at you and all sorts of things. And I sat back and just listened to what the negotiators were saying. And then suddenly, a year or two later down the track, then I was the negotiator, and I was what they call the primary negotiator. You work in a team of 4. Yep. You have a secondary negotiator who assists you as the primary. A third person may be gathering intelligence on the background of the people. Yep. It might be a barricade situation, it might be a hostage situation. And the fourth person would be the conduit before the tactical commander, and etc. So we knew what was all going on. Yeah. And it was wonderful. It was really good. And I did lots and lots of jobs. I'd go out to a job, and here I'm thinking, I'm going to be here all bloody day and night. And you say a few words to somebody and come on out, mate. I'm not going to hurt you. And we always gave people hope, that we're not going to hurt you. We're not going to hurt you. Come out. You might have a gun inside, but put it down and just come out with your hands open, and you'll be met at the door by guys wearing black, and you'll be looked after.
Explain it through.
You're not going to be shot at. You're not going to be bitten by a police dog and all that sort of stuff. And once you got that rapport with them, they'd come out. But sometimes it'd take you 6 or 7 hours to get them out of a house. Yeah. I did the East Lakes Siege many years ago, the hotel where I think a police officer was shot in the shoulder.
Yeah, I remember. Yep.
And I was on call, and it was about 5 o'clock in the morning. I think I got the call. I had to race out to East Gardens, and I think to the hotel there, and a number of hostages inside, and the armed offender, and he'd been shot too by the police, and he was wounded, and the police officer had been shot.
It's all happening.
It's all going. I've got all the bosses there in the world, and yet I'm just here. I'm in a little truck, a 4-wheel drive with a little recorder. Graham Abel threw a recorder in, and I'm talking to this guy, and I end up talking via him to the offender, and it took a number of hours to get him out, but he came out. Yeah. Threw the gun out, got the gun thrown out the window, and then he came out.
And they can be long operations.
Bloody long days.
I know. I did a secondment with the TAU, and it was a job in the southwest of the state, so we were basically driving all night, through the night, get to this siege of blokes in a farmhouse, firing shots, and the negotiators are there. And it's just such a long day. You're laying in the perimeter. You got to be alert the whole time, and the negotiators just going on and on and on.
You sound like a broken record.
I felt like telling the show to shut up. It's all part of the job. But it's another fascinating part of policing. When you look back at your career, do you look back with fondness and satisfaction?
Yeah, I do. I think it's the police family is a great family to be involved with. Not so great for the support that the police obviously deserve. I'm not going to pay out on the coppers for that, but I think the friendships that I've made are friendships for life. The scenarios and situations I've been in, I'll never forget.
Yeah.
I'm catching up with a bunch of mates on the 20th of April up for Police Legacy Day on the Gold Coast. I haven't seen some for 38 years, unreal. But I'll miss it, I miss it now. If I said to myself, would you do it all over again? I go, and in a heartbeat.
Yeah. I like that answer because that's exactly how I feel about it. Like, I enjoy it. It's easier away from it. You step away. You've been out for 2 years. I've been a little bit longer. You realise this type of pressures you were putting on yourself during the time, but you wouldn't give it away for anything.
No, because I always believe that at the end of the day, someone's got to do the job.
Yeah. And
I'd rather it be me than someone else.
Yeah.
And I used to kick a door in. I'd have all these young blokes behind me. And go, Sarge, I'll go in. I said, hey, mate, I'll get a pension if I get hurt. You don't.
Yeah. Well,
and I said, I'd lead the way. But I'd lead the way. If I'm going to do something, I'm not going to, if any of my kids at work got hurt, I'd be devastated. So,
and that's a good way to lead too. Yeah. And you have that responsibility as you start to lead those investigations. You've got to look after the people because people can get hurt in
and we've
policing.
seen plenty hurt,
Yeah. But, well, look, I've enjoyed chatting. It's just brought back so many memories on different things. But, thanks for coming on the Eye Catch Killers. But thank you for the work that you've done. And I say this, and people are probably sick of me saying it, but I'm going to say it again. It's detectives like you that make the difference. Yeah, everyone gets a rap for being a cop. Everyone gets a rap for being a detective. But there's some special detectives that make differences, and you're one of them. So congratulations on your career, and I hope you enjoy your retirement.
Well, Gary Jubelin, thank you very much for having me on today. And look, congratulations with your Eye Catch Killers, etc. It's wonderful, mate. And, I know you're the same mindset as me, mate. And thank you for your service too. Yeah.
Cheers. I really enjoyed talking to Damian. I like the type of detective he is. They're exactly the type of detective I strive to be, someone that's dogged and doesn't give up. You could see that we understood each other's language, and I don't know, if I was a victim of a crime or my loved one was murdered, I'd want someone like Damian on the case. And I've got to say too, he's quite an impressive person. I like the way he goes about his business, and I really enjoyed having that chat with Damian Loone. See you next time.